Hey, Waptors, Mr. Lassiter here. It is halftime of the Notre Dame Duke game, and we are not doing well. By we, I mean Notre Dame, and that is not good for your test tomorrow because I still have some stuff I need to finalize on it. So y'all need to pull us through. We can go ahead and get started here. I see y'all have already kind of begun your discussions on topic. Yeah, right. Let's go ahead and get going. Feel free to ask questions, and let's go. First question here is: should we know about different Enlightenment thinkers? Really no. The Enlightenment really begins at the very end of this time period. So I think kind of early Enlightenment thinkers, maybe like in terms of Hobbes or Locke, you might want to be familiar with, but we will really get into the Enlightenment more in the next time period. Happy Kids, that a Confederate flag cover, book cover? Yeah, I mean, this is slightly off topic. This is an old edition of a Mississippi history book. If you have ever seen the Mississippi state flag, it still, for some asinine reason, contains the Confederate stars and bars, or the battle flag. So that is that. I used to teach Mississippi history, so I found it interesting to compare this book to some earlier or older versions of Mississippi history books. All right. Glad that was on topic. Let's see. Specifics you should know about local resistance, peasant rebellions. I would just maybe look at some basic examples. Know that they exist. We see it in China, particularly the rebellion that helps overthrow the Ming Dynasty. I would say that's your main one. What are some key points about Africa that we should know besides their part in the slave trade? Good. I'm glad that you acknowledge that, because that is the big one. I think it's important to truly understand kind of where Africa was in its development at the beginning of this time period. Africa had been going through this golden age. We see major empires existing in the west of Africa, the Mali, the Songhai Empire. But there are also some prominent kingdoms. The Kingdom of Congo on the west coast of Africa. There is the Swahili coast, which is trading in the Indian Ocean. The Swahili coast was extremely diverse in a lot of ways. The Swahili language is very diverse, with words that come from Arabic and from Hindi and from Chinese and from the Bantu languages, and the even Portuguese when the Portuguese arrived. And also, there was vibrant culture in Ethiopia, which was this thriving kingdom in Africa upon the arrival of Europeans. North Africa, of course, there was the Ottomans encroaching into Egypt, but North Africa very much involved in trade. So that would be kind of the main thing I would tell you to look at. Of course, Africa itself is kind of thrust into the Atlantic system. As they really don't have a choice, or many of them do not have a choice in becoming forced to migrate to the Americas. Other things I think that would be worth noting is originally Africa is the target of the Portuguese, sub-Saharan Africa, and the gold markets there. They find slavery really is like the first returns on profits, but then later on, gold and other commodities. It's also a source for Europeans to sell their goods, especially goods made of manufactured metals and the like. So that's kind of what I would leave you with there. All right. Also there was like important art traditions. We at the end of last semester talked a little bit about art. And there is important oral storytelling and epics that come out of sub-Saharan Africa, such as the Epic of Sundiata. So take a look if you go ahead and look that up if you need. Sundiatta, the Epic of Sundiata. All right, let's see what else there is. What explorers should you know and how much about each? Just be able to recognize some of these explorers. I would say out of the Portuguese, of course, not really an explorer, but certainly know Henry the Navigator. Be able to recognize names of Bartholomew Diaz and Vasco da Gama. As far as sailing for the Spanish, Columbus, I think would be an important guy to know. You may have heard of him. Horrible, horrible fellow. He was not Spanish himself, but sailed for them. Know the Spanish conquistadors. Magellan would be fairly important. Let's see, what else do we have here? Can you go over important trade routes that were present during the Columbian Exchange? Remember, keep in mind the Columbian Exchange is not itself a trade route, but that is a good question. The Columbian Exchange predominantly happens over the Atlantic system. The Atlantic system really beginning this time period, and it is the exchange of, there's multiple ways to define it. The exchange of plants, animals, diseases from the New World to Old and Old World to New. You could also define it by thinking about the Columbian Exchange as the beginning of a process of homogenization of the biospheres of the old and new worlds. So that's kind of a thing, I guess. In terms of trade routes that were present in the Americas, there was trade throughout the Andean regions of South America. There was limited trade in Mesoamerica. The Aztecs even traded with southwestern desert cultures. Get things like stuff like turquoise would be imported from the southwest of what is now the United States. So there were trade routes present. In the rest of the world, the Indian Ocean route, plenty of overland routes, including Trans-Saharan, Silk Road. Of course, there was still the Mediterranean trade system. Indian Ocean, if I haven't already said that. But the Atlantic system will become the major trade route in this time period. Of course, it will eventually overtake the amount of goods traded in the Indian Ocean. And as somebody mentioned in class today, that also the Pacific Ocean trade does develop in this time period, maybe not quite as heavily traveled, but still certainly important in the long run. What should we know about wars and conflicts in Europe, such as the 30 Years' War or what was going on in Britain, kind of culminating in the Glorious Revolution? I would say be generally familiar with what brought those about. We spent a lot of time on them last year. And so I know this leads some of you who did not take me or Mr. Guilford last year kind of at the mercy of your book, but I think that's a good place to go. I also shared with you some reading on the development of kind of modern European governments, or early modern European governments. In general, 30 Years' War precipitated by the Protestant Reformation and people taking sides, Protestant and Catholic, and the wars of religion, as we call them, break out. The wars of religion do a lot of things. They transform the way wars are fought. They see kings raise private armies. And they also see an improvement of weapons technology as all sides try to gain one up on each other. At the end of those wars, the treaties that are signed basically just agree that as a leader in your region, you can choose what religion you are. Wow, what a novel aspect, but it did take a lot of fighting to get there. So I don't want to belittle it too much. Let's see. What do we got next? Sorry, I lost my place here. The next question here. Who were the Ottoman Dhimmi? So Dhimmi. Those were people given like special status in the Ottoman Empire. They were non-Muslims for the most part, and they would pay the jizya, or tax on non-Muslims. I was actually looking that earlier. So if you give me 1 second, I can make sure that I'm giving you a better book definition of it rather than one off the top of my head. The Ottoman Empire is interesting because as they are a Muslim empire, majority Sunni Muslim empire, but they're going to come into contact with a lot of non-Sunni Muslims, whether it be Shia Muslims from the Safavid Empire, or whether it might be Christians and Jews in the Middle East, or even in Europe. The Ottomans, you got to remember, pushed pretty far into Europe. They put Vienna under siege before being turned back by kind of a Christian army that pushes them back to the point where they really won't ever threaten Europe in the same way again. I had a list here. I had a better definition of it, but I do not. I would say just look it up. Otherwise, I'm going to be spending all my time looking in this book. All right, we'll move on from that. Look it up. But in general, they're basically non-Muslims granted special privileges. All right. Did China, Asia have important roles in the Columbian Exchange, or any involvement at all? Well, the Columbian Exchange, again, is kind of a natural process. So yes, in a way, everybody had a role in the Columbian Exchange, but natives and Europeans were the main groups. But China will certainly benefit. Africa, Asia as a whole benefits from the introduction of New World crops into the Old World. And the spread of silver is not a part of the Columbian Exchange. It is part of the trade network that develops in the wake of this New World discovery. And so in that way, yes, China will have a major role in the global system that develops. Let's see. Next, every time y'all type something, I lose my place. Give me 1 second here. How important is the Silk Road in this time period? Was it just the volume of trade was really low, or just gone? So at the beginning of this time period, the Silk Road is still a thing, but I do want to point out that it's basically going to decline and amount and basically peter out. It's going to disappear in this time period, especially under the Qing dynasty of China. They just kind of let it go completely. It's really not needed with the amount of maritime trade. Keep in mind, the Silk Road connected the Far East to the Middle East and to Europe. And the Indian Ocean trade had already taken a lot of that overland trade. It had way surpassed overland trade for some time. But when Europeans get involved in that market, well, then there's no real need to continue that overland trade, connecting it to the Mediterranean. Let's see. Were the general interaction between Christian traders and people in general and the Ottoman Muslims? The general interactions between Christian traders and people in general and the Ottoman Muslims. I mean, it depends where you're looking. The Portuguese did not want to trade with the Ottomans, and that's one of the things that kind of sends them looking for an alternate path to go around. The Italians were perfectly fine trading with the Ottomans. They continue trading in the Mediterranean. So that's pretty much what I would say there. Is Mount McKinley still Mount McKinley? No, they changed its name. Thanks, Obama. Great job. It's now called Denali. Is there any big population change worldwide throughout this time period? Yeah, I mean, we see general population growth worldwide, especially in Afro-Eurasia, because of the introduction of foods from the Americas. In the Americas, we initially see a population drop, drastic population drop initially, but it eventually recovers by the end of this time period, especially due to migration to the region. What's the difference between the Hacienda system and Encomienda system? So the Encomienda system was kind of a more brutal form. It had been used by the Spanish in the Reconquista of the Iberian Peninsula, where they would conquer land and take people in and be like granted that land that they conquer and all the people on it to work for them. And then the people in that land would be responsible for educating these non-Christians into Christian ways and bringing them into the society. It amounted to slavery pretty much in the Americas, and very harsh treatments of Native Americans. Eventually forced it to end with the new laws of 42, 43, somewhere in there. When the new laws passed, it's replaced by more of a plantation type system, the Hacienda system, more kind of plantation agriculture. What effects did inflation have besides general economic decline? That's pretty much what we see in Spain and China. When inflation runs wild, that leads to a lot of economic problems, especially for the lower classes. All right, let's see. Oh, con jokes started happening. I'm just going to skip all of these. Can you tell me the questions? I'll be on the test. Mr. Tyler, I will tell you the questions that are on the test if you would like to know, Mr. Tyler, because you're a teacher. I can share the test with you, sure. Gunpowder empires. What's the most important about each of them? Oh my. Well, I would have to think about that in terms of what's important about each. In kind of different categories. So you have the Ottomans, the Safavid, and the Mughal empires. And I would just say, in general, the two you probably should know best are the Ottomans and Mughals. The Safavid empire, know that it was a majority Shia empire, and that it had some beef with the Ottomans. That's it. That's what I would tell you to know. The Ottomans and Mughals are certainly going to play kind of a bigger role in interactions with other groups. The Ottomans, I would pay close attention to their new form of government that develops, and the way they draft people into the military with the Devshirme system and the creation of the Janissary Corps. I would think about Suleiman the Magnificent, and making sure you kind of have an idea of who he is, their incursions into Europe, and their growth in this time period. Of course, one of the reasons why we choose 1450 as the start date is the Byzantine Empire falls to the Ottomans. I mean, they're going to rise up at the start of this time period, even before Europeans really become significant. The Ottoman Empire has really taken its place. For the Mughals, of course, they replaced the Delhi Sultanate in India, and they used gunpowder to spread their empire across India. And you have a variety of leaders. You have Akbar, who is extremely tolerant and abolishes the jizya tax, and he is, of course, kind of seen as this wonderful leader. His grandson builds the Taj Mahal. Cultural flowering occurring in this time period with new forms of art and architecture. But later on, you see kind of a reaction to it. So, oh, I'm blanking on the name. Akbar, and then, oh, I'm just gonna have to look it up. Mughal. Y'all can help me out with this. One of the Mughal leaders, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, will reestablish the jizya tax, and will actually Aurangzeb. That's it. Aurangzeb will reestablish the jizya tax and start a crackdown on non-Muslims in the country, and that really kind of leaves this not so great legacy of the Mughal Empire. Of course, the name Mughal itself comes from a kind of bastardization of the word Mongol. You may have heard the word mogul before, right? This idea of like, if you're a rich mogul, you make tons of money. That comes from this word Mughal. So kind of throw that out there. A little bit of extra info. Let's see. Can I expand on the British piracy of Spanish silver galleons? So one thing that happens with piracy is it's plentiful in this time period, and that's important to know, because piracy basically runs wild where governments have a hard time policing. I mean, that's the definition of piracy, basically doing something outside of government bounds that is like harmful to people. And early on in this time period, the governments had a very difficult time, especially in places like the Caribbean. There were Barbary pirates off the North African coast, Japanese pirates in the Pacific. So piracy has always been an issue. But in some cases, governments would harbor pirates. So, for example, the British set up multiple ports in the Caribbean where pirates were basically given safe haven, and some of them were actually given licenses to be pirates and to raid Spanish ships, basically doing the jobs that the British would want to do, but maybe were kept from doing because it might spark an all-out war. Next question: what should we know about Dutch and British East India companies? In terms of those companies, they're joint stock companies, which comes about in this time period. They share risk in shipping, which can be very costly. So really the beginnings of buying stock in a company. And they're given monopolies on certain regions. So you have like the British and Dutch East India companies, which of course go into the Indian Ocean, are responsible for trade there. And all those profits kind of feed back into those countries via tax money or what have you. And so they're going to bring immense wealth to their respective countries. What exactly was the raya? I remember it being discussed in the book, I think in the Safavid or Mughal section, but I can't remember a clear definition. Oh, you got me there. Let's see. Heck, I'd have to look that one up. I would say if it was in your book, go back to your book and look it up. But seeing as I have a book here, I will take my time and look it up myself for you, because I'm such a nice person. It sounds like something that might be Safavid, because I usually ignore them and just require you to read your book about them. Let's see. 500s. The 500s. And this is riveting, right? Riveting television, or YouTubeism, I think. Let's see what we got here. Still don't really know why I'm looking this up if it's in your own book, but I shall look it up because I am nothing if not a great teacher. Let's see. I don't see it. I don't see it in here. I don't know. Look it up or send me a link or send me a specific question. I'll see if I can answer that one in the morning. You stumped me. Who was that? Aidan. extra credit to you, sir. I got stumped. I'll see. I'll try to give you a better answer before you take the test tomorrow, though. I can't remember it off the top of my head. What happened to the value of gold during this time period? Oh, heck, I have no idea. You're going to have to look that up. I'm sure it was still valuable. It just wasn't a worldwide commodity. It wasn't the medium of exchange worldwide. But yes, still valuable, I'm sure. Okay. After Manchus invaded Ming China, did the Qing ever open up to trading opportunities again, or did the isolation continue? Good question. So the Qing dynasty is kind of open to trade, as the Ming were, to a certain extent. The very end of this time period really started the next time period. They're going to isolate themselves and kick everybody else out. So that's super important. They will really not open themselves up to trade at all. They will run all trade really in the next time period from 1750 something, 1755, 65, something like that, when they set up the Canton system, all the way until the Opium Wars. They will be very much isolated until the British literally fight their way in to be able to sell illegal drugs. Which key concepts should we prioritize? Another solid question. 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3. Those are the ones that I would prioritize for this test. So all of them. All right. We are at the, how long have we been doing this? I don't have a timer on me. But I'm going to go in about 5 minutes because the second half has already started of this basketball game, which I'm very sad about. Did the Encomienda system and Hacienda system have any great effects on the world? Yes, particularly the Americas, part of the world. Yes, I mean, their legacy is going to be felt for a long time. I mean, it's the Hacienda system will continue all the way till past the independence of many Latin American countries. And in that sense, those revolutions will certainly shock and change the world. Much of the wealth that comes out of the Americas is due to the effects of the Encomienda and Hacienda systems, especially whether it be mining or the production of certain crops. Very, very much a large effect on the world, even if it wasn't, necessarily maybe as direct as you may be thinking. Indirectly has a major impact on the world economy. Oh, y'all are jabbering back and forth. Let's see here. I'm gonna see if I'm just gonna go down the list and see if I can answer questions that are I know will probably be on the test or you should look out for. India start textile industry yet? They're going to start diverting peasant labor to the production of cotton in southern India, but nothing like the industrial age production of textiles like we see after the British take over. Okay, if y'all don't clean up some of this stuff, I'm going to stop doing these. So stop being mean to each other. What's China's relationship with the outside world in terms of trade like? So China, if we think about what its relationship with the outside world was an excuse me, lost my voice there, was an exporter. They imported silver and they exported goods. That's it pretty much. They exported luxury items, silk, porcelain, etc., and they took in silver. And I think those DBQ documents, which are a great review to look back over, even though you won't have a DBQ on your test, really kind of prove that point, and that they are not going to kind of, silver gets into China and it's buried, as one of the British men said. Was Japan a gunpowder empire? Good question. I think we could probably debate whether or not we could call that a gunpowder empire, but I would probably say yes. The debate might be, was it an empire? Or was it uniting people who were terribly similar? I think we probably could still call it an empire. And because it's the union of it under the initial daimyo, Nobunaga used armies that used guns, then yes, I would consider it a gunpowder empire. And remember, the Japanese learned to make guns on their own, so they don't have to rely on imports forever. Did Akbar's religion have a name? I have never heard a name for Akbar's religion. I'm looking it up now. Did Akbar's religion have a name? It looks like it might have had a name called Din-i-Ihali, or Ilahi. And if you are wanting to know how that is spelled, it's D-I-N-I, then a second word, capital I-L-A-H-I. So Din-il-Ilahi. Probably mispronouncing that. Apparently it's Persian for the religion of God. So there you go. We just call it Akbar's religion. It's not a trap. Was Akbar ever called Akbar the Tolerant? I do not know. Look it up. The Mughal Empire, yes. The Mughal Empire fought fervently against the PLP Empire. How the flow of silver to empires like the Ottoman affect their economies? Yeah, so silver, kind of like the spread of, I mean, just imagine when like Mansa Musa went on his pilgrimage and like caused the price of gold to crash in Egypt. The influx of silver all over the world is, when not dealt with right, is going to lead to some inflation. The idea is, how do governments respond to it? In some cases, they're not able to respond quickly enough, and so it'll lead to a weakening of their economies. Most important technological developments that happened, I'm going to have to go in the time period 1450 to 1750 with maritime technologies, including the creation of the caravel, the improvement of the astrolabe and compass. Yeah, I'm going to stick with those as the most important technological developments. All right, take a couple more. Did Japan have a large part in the silver trade? Yes, they did. In fact, Japan had silver mines. So if you remember back on that document-based question, those maps, some people incorrectly put that all silver came from Potosi, but that is not true. Much of the silver around the world came from South America, but there were silver mines in Mexico and Central and Mesoamerica, and in Japan as well. So that was they also played a role in that. All right, I think I've caught up to all of you. There was one question that I really could not answer, and that was the question about the Raya, R-A-Y-A. So I'm gonna have to see if I can find some information about that before I go. Oh, okay. The Raya was the administrative unit of the Ottoman Empire. So basically it was like a province or subdivision. Oh, speaking of governing subdivisions of an empire, let me mention this, because you may see it and I haven't seen anybody ask a question about it. And that is that the Mughal Empire, when they come in and take over, there is a group of landowning elites that they must deal with. And those landowning elites are known as the Zamindars. So Z-A-M-I-N-D-A-R-S. Look those up, make sure you kind of get an idea about them. I think there's some good reading on them on AP Worldopedia. But basically, the Mughal Empire kind of transformed those into regional leaders or regional rulers. And that's going to become important in our next time period. So kind of look and see how the Mughals dealt with the Zamindars. And I think there's good information on that in AP Worldopedia. All right, guys. That's it, I think. For the most part, unless you have any other questions about my bookshelf, we are done for the night. I'm going to go back and hope that we can do this. The Irish will win, and then your test will be easier. See some more questions coming across, but I will answer those in the morning if you would like. Otherwise, I would say look them up on your own. Manila, located in the Philippines. That's it. So keep in mind where were the Philippines in all this trade? A Spanish colony, mind you. All right. I'll check you later, guys. I hope you had a good review session. I'm glad we had somewhere around 25 viewers this whole time. So hopefully some people checked in. And I'll see you tomorrow. Good luck on your studying, and I know you'll do well on this test. Bye.